Your personality is not your potential. It is your past repeated. And the future you keep waiting for cannot meet you while you are emotionally loyal to who you have been. Most people believe change begins with a decision. But the brain does not reorganize itself because you made a promise. It reorganizes itself when your internal state becomes unfamiliar. Right now, your nervous system is wired to prefer what it already knows, even if what it knows is stress. Even if what it knows is disappointment. Familiar emotions feel safe, not because they are good, but because they are predictable. And predictability is survival. So when you imagine a different future, your body quietly resists. Not because you are incapable, but because your chemistry is conditioned to the past. You can say you want confidence, but if your system has practiced insecurity for years, insecurity feels like home. And here is the part no one tells you. Your future does not respond to your wishes. It responds to your coherence. Your brain and body must agree on who you are becoming. If your thoughts say possibility, but your emotions repeat doubt, the body wins. It always wins. Because the body has memorized the past through repetition. Every time you reacted the same way, felt the same frustration, replayed the same story, you strengthened a circuit. Attention is the glue. Repetition is the architect. Emotion is the signal that tells the brain, this matters. Now pause for a moment. Think about how you respond when something unexpected happens. Do you open up or do you contract? Do you create or do you protect? That split-second reaction is not random. It is trained. Your nervous system has practiced it thousands of times. And here is the quiet danger. When you live in survival mode long enough, it starts to feel like your personality. You call it just the way I am. But it is simply a state you have rehearsed over and over until it became automatic. The future you dream about requires a different internal chemistry, a different emotional baseline, a different relationship between attention and intention. And that is why effort alone keeps failing you. Because you are trying to create from the same state that produced your past. The real question is not what you want to have. It is who you must become at a neurological and emotional level. And that transformation does not begin with force. It begins with awareness. But awareness of what exactly? That is where everything starts to shift. Most people try to change their behavior without noticing the emotion driving it. They adjust routines but keep the same internal tension. They chase goals while feeling the same lack. And then they wonder why nothing truly changes. If your body is addicted to a familiar feeling, how can it recognize a new destiny? This is the doorway. You don't notice the moment your body chooses the past over the future. It happens silently. And that silence is what keeps you the same. There is a version of you that already knows how to live differently. But it is buried under layers of emotional memorization. Every time you rehearsed frustration, every time you anticipated rejection, every time you braced for something to go wrong, your brain adjusted. Not to make you happy, to make you efficient. The brain is not designed to make you fulfilled. It is designed to make you familiar. And familiarity becomes identity. Here is the revelation most people miss. You are not thinking your thoughts. Many of your thoughts are emotional echoes. The body feels first, and the mind produces a narrative to justify the feeling. You wake up slightly anxious, and your brain scans for reasons. You feel a subtle emptiness, and suddenly your thoughts become critical. It feels like logic. It is conditioning. When an emotion is repeated enough times, the nervous system begins to expect it. The expectation becomes a filter, and that filter shapes your perception of reality. You don't see the world as it is. You see it through the emotional state your body has practiced. This is why two people can experience the same event and interpret it differently. Their internal state is different. Their past emotional repetitions are different. Their attention lands on different details. And attention is everything. Where your attention goes, your brain wires. What you consistently notice, you reinforce. If you repeatedly notice what is missing, your system strengthens lack. If you repeatedly notice what is wrong, your internal chemistry becomes aligned with defense. Without realizing it, you train your body to stay in survival mode. Subtle tension, subtle urgency, subtle comparison. It becomes normal. You don't call it stress anymore. You call it responsibility. You call it ambition. You call it being realistic. But survival mode is not creative mode. In survival, your focus narrows. You think about the past or anticipate the worst-case future. Your nervous system prepares to protect, not to expand. And in that state, even if opportunity appears, you may not recognize it, because your system is scanning for threat, not possibility. So when you say you want a different future, but your body is emotionally anchored to the past, there is an internal conflict. Your thoughts aim forward, your chemistry pulls backward, and chemistry is powerful. If you have ever tried to change and felt an invisible resistance, this is why. It is not laziness, it is not lack of intelligence, it is your body defending its emotional history. But what happens when you begin to observe that pattern instead of obeying it? What happens when awareness interrupts repetition? That is where the real shift begins to whisper. Total words, 500. Block 2. The most dangerous habit you have is the one you don't feel. You think your biggest limitation is fear, or doubt, or procrastination. But the real threat is emotional autopilot. Because when a pattern becomes automatic, it stops asking for permission. You don't decide to react the way you do. It just happens. Someone says something, and your body tightens before you even understand why. An opportunity appears, and you hesitate without conscious thought. A new possibility emerges, and a quiet voice says, "This won't work." That voice feels like you. But it is repetition speaking. Every emotional reaction you repeat strengthens a neural pathway. The brain loves efficiency. If you have responded to uncertainty with anxiety hundreds of times, the next time uncertainty appears, your system will not pause to evaluate. It will trigger the stored program. And here is the invisible danger. The body begins to predict the future based on the past. If you have experienced disappointment enough times, your nervous system prepares for it before it happens. That preparation alters your perception. You may interpret neutral events as negative. You may withdraw before being rejected. You may underperform before being judged. Not because you are incapable, because your internal state is anticipating survival. In survival mode, the brain prioritizes protection over growth. It narrows focus to what could go wrong. It amplifies threat signals. It reduces creative flexibility. Over time, this becomes your baseline. You might call it being cautious or realistic. But underneath, it is a conditioned emotional loop. And loops are powerful. When your body memorizes a state like stress or frustration, it can become chemically dependent on it. The hormones of survival, those familiar surges of urgency or irritation, become the body's normal. If a day feels calm, you may unconsciously look for a problem to solve. If things are going well, you may anticipate when they will collapse. Because calm feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe to a conditioned nervous system. This is how the past keeps recreating itself. Not through fate. Not through bad luck, but through internal continuity. Your attention locks onto what matches your memorized state. Your reactions reinforce the same emotional chemistry, and the cycle strengthens. The threat is not external. It is the unconscious loyalty to a familiar feeling. And until you see that loyalty, you will keep protecting an identity that no longer serves you. But what if the moment you feel the automatic reaction is the moment you could interrupt it? What if the real power is not in fighting the pattern, but in noticing it before it fully takes over? That awareness is subtle, but it changes everything. You have felt it before. That quiet frustration when you promise yourself you will respond differently. And then you don't. You say you will stay calm. You say you will stop overthinking. You say this time will be different. And yet, in the moment, your body moves first. Your reaction feels faster than your intention. And afterward, you feel disappointed, not just because of what happened, but because it feels like you betrayed yourself. But what if you were never lacking discipline? What if your nervous system was simply doing what it has been trained to do? This is where you begin to see yourself differently, not as broken, not as weak, but as conditioned. Think about how many years you have practiced being you. The same emotional responses, the same interpretations, the same internal conversations. If you have rehearsed irritation for 10 years, why would it disappear in 10 days? Your brain wires through repetition. Your body memorizes through emotion. And together, they create what feels like personality. You might say, "That's just how I am under pressure." Or, "I've always been this way." But that statement hides something powerful. You were not born reacting exactly as you do now. You learned it. Slowly, through experience, through attention, through emotional reinforcement. And what is learned can be relearned. But here is the deeper layer. Most of your emotional reactions are not about the present moment. They are about the past being reactivated. Someone raises their voice, and your body remembers a different moment. A subtle rejection occurs, and your nervous system retrieves an old memory. You are not reacting to now. You are reacting to history. That is why the reaction feels disproportionate. The intensity you feel is often accumulated emotion, not current reality. When you begin to understand this, something shifts. Instead of judging yourself for reacting, you start observing the pattern. You notice the tightening in your chest. You notice the rapid thoughts. You notice the urge to defend or withdraw. And in that noticing, there is space. A small gap between stimulus and response. Most people miss that gap because they are inside the emotion. But when you become aware of your internal state in real time, you are no longer fully identified with it. You are watching it. And the moment you can observe a pattern, you are no longer completely controlled by it. This is the beginning of creation mode. Not forcing change, not suppressing emotion, but recognizing that you are not the reaction. You are the awareness behind it. And if you can stay in that awareness just a little longer than usual, something new starts to form. The moment you become aware of your reaction, you create tension inside yourself. Not emotional tension, cognitive tension. Because now you see two versions of you at the same time, the automatic one and the observing one. And they do not agree. The automatic self wants to react the usual way. It wants to defend, withdraw, overthink, or control. It feels justified. It feels urgent. It feels real. But the observing self sees the pattern. It recognizes the familiar emotion rising. It knows this state has been rehearsed. And suddenly, you are no longer fully convinced by your own reaction. That is uncomfortable. Because for years, Your identity has been built around consistency. This is who I am. This is how I respond. This is what I feel. And now, awareness introduces doubt into that identity. If you are not your reaction, then who are you? This is where most people retreat, because observing the pattern without immediately changing it feels strange. It feels like standing in the middle of a storm without moving. Your nervous system does not like that pause. It prefers completion. If anger starts, it wants expression. If anxiety rises, it wants action. If doubt appears, it wants confirmation. But when you interrupt the automatic completion of the pattern, the body feels unsettled, almost restless. That restlessness is not failure. It is withdrawal from familiarity. You have trained your system to complete certain emotional cycles. When you stop mid-cycle, when you notice the surge but choose not to follow it fully, you create a gap in the repetition. And the brain does not immediately know what to do with that gap. This is why change feels awkward before it feels empowering. Your old self feels coherent because it is practiced. Even if it is limiting, it is synchronized. Thoughts, emotions, reactions, they align in a predictable way. There is internal consistency. But when you begin to shift, that coherence breaks temporarily. Your thoughts may aim toward possibility, while your body still carries old chemistry. You feel split. And in that split, you might question yourself. Why does this feel so hard? Why can't I just be different? Why do I still feel the same emotions? Because your body is still memorizing the past. Awareness alone does not instantly rewire the brain, but it stops unconscious reinforcement. And that is critical. Because every time you observe without fully reacting, you weaken the old pathway slightly. Not dramatically, subtly. And subtle shifts, repeated consistently, create new stability. But here is the deeper question. If you can interrupt the old pattern, what would it take to install a new one? What if the version of you that creates a different future is not built through force, but through rehearsal? Most people try to eliminate the old self. They fight their habits. They argue with their emotions. They try to suppress familiar reactions. But suppression is still attention. And attention feeds what it focuses on. The brain does not change because you resist something. It changes because you repeatedly experience something new. If repetition built the old identity, repetition can build the new one. But here is where it becomes real. You cannot wait for your environment to change before you feel different. Because if your internal state only shifts when circumstances improve, you remain dependent. You remain in survival mode, reacting to what happens. Creation mode works differently. In creation, you generate the emotional state before the external evidence appears. Not as fantasy, not as denial, but as neurological preparation. Your brain does not fully distinguish between an experience that is happening and one that is vividly rehearsed with emotion. When you repeatedly imagine yourself responding calmly, confidently, creatively, and you allow your body to feel that state, you begin installing new circuitry. At first, it feels artificial, unnatural, even slightly uncomfortable, because your body is not used to that chemistry. If you have practiced stress for years, calm may feel empty. If you have rehearsed doubt, confidence may feel arrogant. If you have memorized scarcity, abundance may feel unrealistic. This discomfort is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are stepping outside familiarity. The key is not intensity. It is consistency, short moments of coherent attention. Moments where your thoughts and emotions align around who you are becoming, not who you have been. When you repeatedly enter that state, intentionally, consciously, you begin teaching your nervous system a new baseline. You are no longer waiting for life to change you. You are rehearsing change internally. And slowly, something subtle happens. The new state becomes less foreign. The old reaction becomes easier to notice. The gap between stimulus and response widens. Your body no longer automatically completes the old emotional cycle with the same strength. You begin to feel choice, not because the external world shifted, but because your internal state stabilized differently. And once your internal state changes consistently, your perception changes. You notice different opportunities. You respond differently in conversations. You make decisions from a different chemistry. And decisions made from a new state create different outcomes. But the real shift is deeper than outcomes. It is identity. And identity change is not loud. It is quiet. It happens when your body finally trusts a new way of being. The question is, are you willing to feel unfamiliar long enough for that trust to form? The turning point does not happen when you master your emotions. It happens when you stop negotiating with them. There is a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when you realize you no longer want to be loyal to the familiar version of yourself. Not because you hate who you've been, but because you see clearly how that version was built. Through repetition, through unconscious attention, through emotional conditioning that once protected you, and something inside you decides, protection is no longer the goal. Creation is. This is the internal turn. Before this moment, you are trying to change while still emotionally attached to your old identity. You rehearse new thoughts, but secretly justify old reactions. You visualize a different future, but emotionally revisit past disappointments. After this moment, something shifts in priority. You begin valuing awareness more than validation. You begin valuing coherence more than comfort. You start noticing when your nervous system wants to contract, and instead of automatically following it, you pause. That pause becomes powerful, because now, when the old emotion rises, you recognize it as memory, not destiny. When stress appears, you see it as a rehearsed state, not a command. When doubt surfaces, you observe it as a conditioned signal, not truth. And this recognition weakens its authority. You start asking a different question in real time. Is this reaction aligned with who I am becoming? Not with who you've been. Not with what feels familiar, but with the version of you your future requires. That question alone reorganizes your attention. Because attention is not passive. It directs neural resources. When you shift your focus from defending the old identity to reinforcing the new one, you are literally reallocating energy inside your brain. Instead of replaying the past, you begin rehearsing possibility. Instead of emotionally confirming old narratives, you begin stabilizing new states. And here is the deeper shift. You stop waiting for motivation. Motivation belongs to survival. It depends on external stimulation, but identity change depends on decision. Quiet. Internal. Repeated. You begin showing up as the new version before it feels natural. You respond calmly even when irritation tries to surface. You hold your posture when insecurity whispers. You choose clarity when confusion would have been easier. At first, it feels like acting, but repetition transforms acting into being. And slowly, the body starts trusting the new state. The nervous system stops fighting it. The unfamiliar becomes stable. The new identity begins to feel coherent. Not because the world changed, but because you did. And when that internal coherence stabilizes, the future no longer feels distant. It feels inevitable. There is no dramatic moment when the new you arrives. No external applause. No instant transformation. Just a quiet stability that begins to replace the old turbulence. And that is how you know it is real. When your internal state changes consistently, the need to prove it disappears. You are no longer trying to convince yourself you are different. You are simply responding differently. The same situations that once triggered you now feel lighter, not because they vanished, but because your nervous system is no longer rehearsing the same chemistry. This is integration. It is when the brain and body begin to agree. Before, your thoughts aimed forward while your emotions pulled backward. Now, they move in the same direction. Your attention is no longer trapped in past scenarios. It is anchored in who you are choosing to be. And that coherence changes how you experience time. Instead of anticipating problems, you anticipate possibility. Instead of scanning for threat, you notice openings. Instead of reacting to life, you participate in it. The future you were waiting for was never waiting in the external world. It was waiting for internal alignment. Most people think their future depends on opportunity, timing, or luck. But your future is a reflection of your most consistent internal state, not your occasional bursts of motivation, not your temporary resolutions, your baseline. If your baseline is survival, you will keep recreating situations that confirm it. If your baseline becomes creation, you begin interacting with reality differently. You speak differently. You choose differently. You persist differently. And those subtle differences compound. The body that once memorized stress can memorize calm. The brain that once reinforced doubt can reinforce clarity. The nervous system that once prepared for threat can learn to remain open. But it requires one continuous practice: awareness before effort. Not forcing change, not fighting yourself, but noticing, rehearsing, stabilizing, repeating. Your future is not waiting for you to work harder. It is waiting for you to become neurologically and emotionally coherent with it. And that version of you is not built in a single breakthrough. It is built in quiet, daily decisions, in the moments no one sees, in the pauses where you choose a new response, in the internal rehearsals where you feel the state before the evidence appears. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about dissolving what you repeatedly practiced that no longer serves you. And when you do, the distance between who you are and who you want to be begins to disappear. If this resonated with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next step in your transformation journey.